Hello everyone, welcome to Lost in the Stacks. This is our first main video. It's January monthly wrap-up time to talk about all the books that I read this month. I'm very excited to talk about the books that I read this month because it was a really good reading month. So yeah, let's get into it. So before I get into each individual book that I read, we do words here, but not very well. What I wanted to go over was just kind of an overall review of how this month went. And January was definitely the month of fantasy. I think the majority of the books I read were fantasy. I'm gonna count real quick because I have my computer up in front of me. So let's see, I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 fantasy books. I finished 12 books. So yeah, all but 2 of the books I read were fantasy. So January was definitely the month of fantasy. I read 2 advanced copies of books, which I'm very excited to talk about. I read 2 novellas and a short story, which a short story does count as books if it's like 50 pages, right? I also finished listening to an audiobook. I finished listening to Return of the King, which I've listened to the first half of it in December. So I don't know if you count that as like the 12th book, but I'm counting it. Not really going to talk about it though, because we don't need me to talk for an hour about Lord of the Rings. So yeah, those are my highlights. Let's get into the first book that I read this month. The first book that I read was The City of Dreaming Books by Walter Moers. And technically, I started this at like 11 p.m. on New Year's Eve. But I don't care. I read the majority of this in January. I found this at a little used bookstore and was just like, this looks very interesting. So I read it. And if you don't know what this book is about, it's about this he's like a dragon or a dinosaur. He's like some version of that. And in this world, he is growing up to become a writer. And his mentor person dies and bequeaths him this I don't know. He gives him this manuscript that an author sent him a long time ago. The author didn't sign it or anything, but it's supposed to be the greatest work that has ever been written. And so after his mentor dies, the main character decides, I'm gonna go find this author. And he goes to the City of Dreaming Books to find the author of this manuscript. And he goes on a really crazy adventure in this city, which is really cool, honestly. I wish it really existed because I would definitely go there. And the author's description is just, it brings it to life in your head. But it's such a good book. I loved it. I specifically like that the author mixed different mediums or mixed media. It's mixed media and art. This is a mixed media book. It has songs, it has poetry, it has normal literature, it has short stories within it, it has lots of drawings and doodles. It was so good. I loved it so much. I rated it 5 stars. If you like reading books about books, this is a really good thing for you to read. So definitely highly recommend City of Dreaming Books by Walter Moers. The next 2 books I read were The Son of Neptune. I cannot do words today, but that's okay. The next 2 books I read were The Son of Neptune and Mark of Athena, which, if you recognize those, I'm joining the Percy Jackson fandom. Hello. I read the first series last year, and then I started the second series in December, read the first book, and I read the next 2 books in January. I'm really enjoying it. I don't think the second series is as good as the first, but I am enjoying it. And my plan is in February is to finish the second series, and then we'll see how I feel overall about it by the time we get to that point. So hopefully next month's wrap-up video, I'll discuss that, how I feel about it, especially comparing the first and second series. But I rated The Son of Neptune 3 stars because I felt like it wasn't as good as the first book. I like the first book better, so I'm just comparing. But yeah, I gave it 3 stars. It was good, it just wasn't as good. And I rated The Mark of Athena 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I love anything with Annabeth. She's amazing. So yeah, those were the next 2 books I read. But I'm really liking the Heroes of Olympus series. So last year in like December, I found this author. Her name is Alyssa, hold on with me, Zavalianos. I really hope I'm pronouncing that right. She has written several fantasy novels. And the one that I saw that I was like, I want to read this so bad, is called Unearth the Tides. It is a 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea retelling, which, if you know me, you know that I love Jules Verne. And I was like, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I'm down for this. So I read it. I really enjoyed it. I felt like it could have been, the story itself could have been fleshed out more. But overall, it was really well written. It stayed really close to the original plot of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but the author added in her own stuff, and I really like that. It is currently on Kindle Unlimited, so if you have Kindle Unlimited and you want to read it, I definitely recommend it. I gave it 4 stars. It was a pretty good book. So the next book I read was one that a friend gave me for Christmas. It's called The Curse of Rago, and it's by Kate Korsak, who I followed her on Instagram last year because she makes fantasy maps, and I was like, these are really cool. And then I read her book, and I'm like, I will stay for more. Like, I came for the maps, I stayed for the books. She is just incredible, and I really like The Curse of Rago. It is about this prince, and he has these dreams of his home burning down, and then it actually burns down, and like he has to go on this adventure to solve like what caused the fire, why is his whole family dead, and he's being accused of their murder, and he runs into this other prince who's out there to kill him, but then they become friends, and it's just really good. I really enjoyed it. My one thing was I felt like the relationship between the 2 princes just kind of happened. They went from I want to murder you to let's be friends really fast, and there wasn't really much explanation of how that happened. And maybe it's just because I'm autistic and I'm poor. I have a really poor time like picking up on stuff like that. Maybe it was fine, but that was like my one beef. But I rated 4 stars, and it was really good. It was great for a debut novel. She's coming out with a duology. The first book in the duology is coming out in November, I think. And so I'm excited to read that. And maybe she'll give me an advance copy, please. But if I do get a hold of that, I will definitely be talking about it. But yeah, that's The Curse of Rago by Kate Korsak. The next book that I read, and this is an advance copy of a book that I got, is Lady Macbeth by Ava Reid. This is a retelling of the story of Macbeth from Lady Macbeth's point of view. I still have mixed feelings about this. I really do. It was very dark, and my book bestie read this with me, and she also was like, this is kind of dark. And I still don't know how I feel about it. Like, Ava Reid is a masterful writer. I love the way it was written. It was very well written, very well done. It draws you in, it sucks you in. I think that's the problem. It sucks you in. And then when it gets dark, you can't escape. You're just there. You're stuck. You can't leave. You cannot leave the story. You're just like trapped watching all these horrible things happen, and you're just like, I'm too invested. I can't leave. So I, it was really good, but also really dark, and it made me kind of depressed and cry. I have some beef with you, Ava Reed. I have some beef. But like, I can't complain about it. That's the thing. Like, it was written so well that I can't really complain about it. It just was really dark. So if you cannot handle really dark stories, body horror, the topics of rape and sexual assault, do not read this. Do not. If you're okay with reading about stuff like that, then go ahead, read it. It's great. But yeah, it is very dark. Be prepared for that. But it is a really well-written, masterful book. Ava Reed did an amazing job. I think it's coming out in August. I will put that somewhere over here when it's coming out. So yeah, it's Lady Macbeth by Ava Reed. The one book that I read, well, I read two books that were not like fantasy, but this is like the one mystery book that I read this month, was Beloved Poison, which is the first book in the Jem Flockhart series by E.S. Thompson. And if you watched my first video, my intro video, you know I love her. I love her books. I read Surgeons Hall last year, fell in love, bought the rest of the books except for Nightshade. I haven't been able to find Nightshade yet, so I'll get that eventually. But I loved this so much. Beloved Poison is the first book in the Jem Flockhart series, so it introduces him. And I honestly wish I had read this book first, because like when I was reading Surgeons Hall, there was like little things that I picked up on about Jem's like background, but the first book really delves into that, especially the aspect of him. I don't really know which way to go with pronouns. Really with her being an apothecary in Victorian London who is disguised as a man so that she can be an apothecary, and growing up being forced by her dad to do that. It really was great reading her origin story, and also the friendship that she makes with Will Quarterman, who becomes her best friend by the time I read Surgeons Hall. And basically in this one, she solves her first murder. And there are like 3 different people that get poisoned in this book, and they all got poisoned in different ways. And honestly, I was there for it. It was great. The murderers got caught in the end, sort of. Sort of. That's my little, like, I'm not actually spoiling it because I say sort of they got caught. They didn't actually. You gotta read the book. I highly recommend anything by E.S. Thompson, because now I've read 2 books by her and I love them both. And yes, she is a queen, and I'm excited to read the other 3 books that she has about Jem. So yeah, that's Beloved Poison by E.S. Thompson. So the second advanced copy of a book that I got was The Sea at the End of Everything by Emily McCosh. And this is coming out in a few days. Put the date up here somewhere. This is coming out in a few days, and I highly, highly, highly recommend that you get it. So I discovered Emily McCosh on Instagram last year and read her book, Over the Earth, Under the Sky. And she writes like it's a fairy tale. Like, it's a fairy tale. And you just fall in love with the characters. And this specific one was a novella. This was a novella. And I got sucked in, fell in love with the characters, fell in love with the story. It's basically about these 2 girls that live in this town that sounds like it's either coastal Ireland or Scotland. And this guy washes up on the beach during this big bad storm. And then the whole novella is about finding out, who is this guy? Like, what is he doing here? Where did he come from? Like, and like all the magic and mystery that goes behind all of this. And it's just, normally I don't like novellas or short stories because I feel like the majority of the ones I read aren't very well written. They're just kind of mid, but this was good. 5 stars. You gotta read this book. It's so good. And read her other book, please, because Emily McCosh is a small author. Give her some love. Look her up on Instagram. Read her books. She's amazing. So yeah. So I did read one short story this month, and that was Mother Country by E. Taff Rum. So I follow Easy Cat on YouTube and Instagram. I love watching his videos. I think he recommends really good books usually. And I read this one. This was recommended by him. I found it on Kindle Unlimited. And I read it in about an hour. It's like 50 pages. And when I tell you this thing made me cry. So basically, it is this Palestinian woman is writing a letter to her mother and talking about how her mom and the way her relationship with her mom affected her life growing up, getting married, raising a family, and the things that happened after that. I won't spoil anything. It's very short, but yeah, it made me cry. It was very touching. It was also kind of relatable in some ways, and I really liked it. So yes, if you want a good little short read, yeah, Mother Country by E. Taff Rum is a really good little short story to read. The second novella that I read two, is The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Call. And if you follow me on Instagram and you saw that I went to Barnes & Noble for the first time, you probably realized that that is the book that I bought, because I have this compulsion to buy a book whenever I go to the bookstore. I cannot go to a bookstore without buying a book. It just feels so wrong, which is a problem because my TBR shelf is starting to overflow. But I got The Salt Grows Heavy. I loved it. It is a horror novella, and it just was good. It was very well written. Again, I don't normally go for novellas because they're normally not very well done, but this was very well done. I was a little confused at the beginning. Like there was some stuff that happened that I was just like, I don't fully understand what's happening here. But the majority of the book was not like that. So it was just the first chapter, and I was just like, I don't know what's happening, but I'm gonna stay. And then I stayed, and I'm really glad I stayed. It's basically about a witch and a plague doctor who go on this journey together and encounter some weird stuff. And it's very dark. It's not as dark as Lady Macbeth, but it is dark. If you're not comfortable with body horror, this is not the book for you. But if you're okay with that, and you're okay with mermaids talking about how evil mermaids can be, definitely read this. If you were a mermaid girly, like when you were middle school, but then in high school you were like an emo girly, this is the book for you. That's all I gotta say, because that was me, and I loved this book. So yeah, I really like this. It's staying on my shelf. I'm glad I got it. The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Call. The last book that I want to talk about, which I did technically read this in the middle of the month, but I wanted to save it for last because it was my favorite book that I read. A Crown of Chains by Erin Phillips. Now, this is a biblical story retelling. So it is a retelling of the story of Esther, and normally I don't really like Christian fiction Bible story retellings because they're usually kind of mid. They're normally not well done, but this was well done. This was well done. And Erin Phillips also has a retelling of the story of Esther. So, not the story of Esther. This was that book. The story of Ruth. The story of Ruth. So I really want to read that, and I can't wait to read it. I'm planning on reading that in February, so gonna do that. But basically, if you're not familiar with the story of Esther, basically it is about a Jewish girl who gets chosen to be the wife of King Artaxerxes in Persia, and she ends up through a bunch of events saving her entire culture from genocide. The entire Jewish people from being killed. So in this retelling, it is a fantasy retelling, and the Jews are fairies. And our main character is born without wings, so she's able to fit in with the humans, is chosen by the king to be his wife, which Aaron Phillips definitely plays up the fact that the king was not a good person. He was really not great. Again, if you're not okay with reading about sexual assault, do not read this book. Like, it's a Christian book, so it is toned down a lot, but it's still there. It's still talked about. So if you're not okay with reading that, don't read this book. But otherwise, this was so good. I love this book so much. Yeah, Aaron Phillips knows how to do a retelling of a Bible story, and I'm excited to read the one about Ruth, and I'm hoping she puts out more at some point because I really, really want to read more of her books. So yeah, I really liked it. It's called A Crown of Chains. It's by Aaron Phillips. Both this book and her book on the story of Ruth is on Kindle Unlimited. So yeah, those are all the books I read. 11 plus half of Return of the King, which honestly, with how long Return of the King is, I'm counting that as my 12th book. So I read 12 books in January, and I'm honestly really happy because this is a really good start to the year. My goal for the year is to read more books because I went in this huge reading slump while I was in college. I'm still technically in college, but I graduated in May, so I'm looking towards that light at the end of the tunnel. But I've been in a reading slump, and now I'm out of that, and I think this is a really good start to the year. Technically, Goodreads says I'm 5 books ahead of schedule on my reading goal, which is 75 books, so I kind of want to keep that up and maybe read more than 75 books, maybe 100. We'll see. I don't know what's going to happen. It all depends on how life goes. Haven't really been able to read for the past couple of weeks, week and a half, just because of life stuff, but hopefully soon I'll get back into it. I'm currently reading Dark Serpent by Paul Doherty, and I'm really enjoying it. It's set during the time of Edward II. And I'm really, I think February is probably going to be the month of mystery books. Like January was fantasy. I think I'm a mood reader, so this is what happens. And I think this is definitely going to be the month of mysteries. So yeah, I can't wait to talk about whatever books I read in February, in a month. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed hearing me talk about all the books I read. I really enjoy talking about them. And yeah, subscribe, follow me on Instagram, Lost in the Stacks, if you want more bookish content. Yeah. I hope you have a great reading month in February. Bye!